Okay, here's an idea. What's common among people? Well, we're self-conscious, so we know of our own existence and we know of our own limitations, and so that means that we have a certain innate terror and fragility. Our existence is a problem to us, and in some sense what we're trying to do when we search for meaning is to search for a solution to that problem, and that can be security, but it can also be mode of being, you know. And so, for example, being engaged in something worthwhile seems to be a good medicine for being fragile, you know, because you think, well, I'm doing this, it seems worthwhile, and the fact that there's a price to be paid for it and that things could befall me that aren't good, I'm willing to put up with that because what I'm engaged in seems to be of sufficient significance to justify all that. We all become self-conscious and we're all trying to do something about that, figure out how to deal with it. So there's a landscape that we inhabit, I would say, within which that takes place. So there's a human being, self-conscious, doomed to tragedy, and doomed to be aware of that. The human being has two elements, and that's the element that seeks the good, and there's the other element that seeks, I would say, revenge and destruction. And we have our reasons, you know. If something tragic happens to you, it's tragic and unfair, and it really brings you low, the probability that you're going to become resentful and want revenge is extraordinarily high, and no wonder. And you know, the archetypal representation of that is evil itself, and the archetypal representation of the good that you could do is the hero. And so those things inhabit us. They're permanent elements of the human psyche. And then what else is universal to us? Well, we live in a society, you could say, and that's deep, that's deep. It's not just human society. Like, we've lived in a society forever. So, you know, lobsters live in dominance hierarchies, and they use their serotonin system, at least in part, to keep track of their dominance position. And so you can use antidepressants on lobsters when they get defeated, and they don't feel so bad from being defeated in a fight. And so you just think about that, because antidepressants do the same thing to us. We're so bloody social that the circuits that evolved 300 million years ago, when the lobsters and us had a shared ancestor, are still operating at the base of your brain. That's why status is so important to people, and reputation. I mean, that serotonin system governs your emotional regulation. How people respond to you and what they think of you, man, that matters. That's why you're on Facebook all the time and checking your texts and obsessing continually about your online presence, assuming that you're doing that, and you know, contacting people frantically and seeing what the updates are. It's like, how are you held in the esteem of others? Very, very important, and that's because it determines your emotional regulation. It's really important. So we exist in a society, always, and the society has two elements. The tyrannical element of the society, that would be the tyrannical king, roughly speaking, a very common mythological theme. You see that in the Lion King too, right? Because that's Scar. And of course you see it in the real world with almost continually. And then the benevolent king, who is the source of all the good things about culture. You know, and you can see these things play out as mythologies in political terms. So I would say, for example, the continual harping about the oppressive nature of the patriarchy is part of a myth, and the myth is that society is oppressive. It's like, well, yeah, obviously, you know, because you have to be quite a bit like you, and you have to be quite a bit like you, even if you're not, so that you can get along, right? Everybody sacrifices a tremendous amount of their individuality to the common mode of being. There's a tyrannical element to that. But, you know, by the same token, it's the basis of cooperation and the stability of society. And the final element is, that's often represented in a masculine manner, by the way, society. And I think that's because our primary dominant structures, given the creatures we are, like chimpanzees, the primary structures of dominance are masculine. And then outside of what's known is the unknown. And we always have to contend with that, and it's wonderful in that it's the source of all new things, and it's terrible in that it's the place where all the things that destabilize you come from. And so this is a good representation, although not the only one. So that's the feminine nature, that's the masculine order, and that's the individual who's destined to suffer in the grasp of those two things.